let's talk about components. Let's go through all 5 of the components and what you can and kind of cannot serve with CACFP. So first is fluid milk. So again, we talked about the amounts that you had to be served, but now we're going to talk about specific components. So if you have any 1-year-olds, you're required to serve unflavored whole milk. So again, if they are 1, that is what they get is unflavored whole milk, again, unless you have a doctor's note. 2 to 5, it's lower. The fat content is not whole. They have to go down to either fat-free or low fat. And it does, again, have to be unflavored. Anybody that participates on the adult daycare, or if they're 6 and older, they can have flavored or unflavored, fat-free or low-fat milk. Again, if you have an infant, they are not allowed to have milk. They can only have iron fortified formula or breast milk. Now, there is a 1-month transition period that's also allowed. So we have the one from going from formula to milk. We also have a transition period for toddlers that once they become 24 months to go to 25 months. So this is when they become 2. Instead of switching them completely from whole milk to either the fat-free or skim, you're also allowed to kind of mix them together or just help them transition. So there is, again, another transition period for milk for those that were on whole milk and going to the lower fat content. So you can, again, you can mix the milks. Like if you want to do half whole, half low fat, you can do that. You can just ease them into it. But again, you have the 30 days to do the transition. Now, anybody at your facility that is age 1 or older, they can still have breast milk. Breast milk will always be considered milk. So it doesn't matter. They could be 1, they could be 5. If they're still getting breast milk, it can still be claimed. Now, it is allowable for the parents to come up and breastfeed. So if that's the case, then you're not measuring the amount if the parent is breastfeeding. But if they are giving it to you by expressed, meaning when they give it to you, it's like in a bottle or any other container, you are required to give them the required amount based on the meal pattern. So let's just say that the mom brings you 1/4 of a cup and they're a 1-year-old and they have to have a half a cup serving. So you would have to supplement. You can give them that the 1/4 of a cup of breast milk, but you would also have to give them 1/4 of a cup of unflavored whole milk to equal the 1/2 of a cup. So it is required that they still have the serving size, even if it is breast milk. So just let the parent be aware if they're not giving you enough that you would have to supplement with the appropriate milk for their age to make sure they get the correct amount of breast milk. Now, for anybody that is participating in our adult daycare centers, now this is only for adult daycare, childcare, you cannot do this. But for our older participants that are on the adult daycare program, you are allowed to substitute a yogurt for milk 1 time per day. So as you would saw there, for breakfast and lunch, it's required to have a milk. At snack, it is optional if it's one of your 2 components. So maybe your participants just do not like milk. So maybe for breakfast one day, you choose to have yogurt as a milk instead. So again, you can have yogurt as a milk, but yogurt is also considered a meat alternate. So it can't be the 2 components in the same meal. So a yogurt cannot be a meat alternate and a milk. You have to choose. So if it is your milk, you could either do something else as a meat alternate, or if you do it at breakfast, a meat alternate is not required. Milk substitutions, it is allowable that a parent can make a milk substitution. And the reason for this is if you think about it, let's just say it's for religious reasons, that the family doesn't eat beef or pork. And so you can substitute that with chicken or fish or any other type of meat. But milk, the only milk that's allowable on CACFP is cow's milk, if it's a cow source. And sometimes you have families that, because of their lifestyle, maybe they are not allowed to have cow's milk because it comes from a cow source. Maybe they are vegan. And so vegans do not eat animal byproducts, and that would include cheese or milk. So this does allow the parent, the milk substitution is the only thing that a parent is allowed to request. It is up to the center if they do want to participate in the milk substitution. So you are allowed, you're the one that can pick what it is. The only milk substitutions that we can find right now are soy-based, and there's only like 3 of them on the market. But some people do get confused that maybe you have a child that they have to have lactose-free milk. Lactose-free milk comes from a cow, so it is considered milk. You do not need a doctor's note on this. It's the same with Brahma's milk or A2 milk or Fairland milk. The proteins in them are just a little bit different. Shelf stable, if it is cow's milk, it is considered milk. Does not need a milk substitution form. Now, if you're talking about powders, like a powdered milk, that is not a milk, it's a powder. So anytime we talk about milk, it has to be from a cow and liquid is considered a milk. But anything else that is not liquid milk from a cow would have to be considered for a milk substitution. Or again, you need a doctor's note. If you have a doctor's note, you always do what the doctor's note says. So like with the milk substitution, the form can be completed by a parent. Maybe it is an allergy situation, so a doctor did fill it out, but it does have to meet the nutrient requirements. If you are needing a milk substitute, again, the ones that we have are soy. The ones that we know that work are, if you use a vendor, is Pearls. It's shelf stable and it's an individual. You can go to Walmart and get their soy milk, their Great Value brand, that works. And then there's one called Eighth Continent. The last time I saw it, it was yellow. And again, it's a soy base. And again, even when it comes to the milk substitutions, if they are under age 5, they cannot have flavored milk substitution. It has to be plain. The flavored milks can only come for those that are 6 and older. So if they're giving them vanilla, that is a flavored milk substitution, and that's not allowable for anybody under the age of 6. So from 1 to 5, it has to be plain, pretty much soy milk. Now, if you do have a doctor's note, or maybe you have a doctor's note and it says on there to give them almond or coconut milk, or maybe it says vanilla almond, you do whatever the doctor's note states. If it just says no milk, then you should be giving them the milk substitution, one that meets the guidelines. But if they give you something specific, then you always do what the medical note states. Even if it doesn't meet requirements on our program, any doctor's note will trump, and that will still make it a reimbursable meal. If you still have any questions about this, I always tell you to reach out to your program specialist because they can help you. They know your area very well, because sometimes they do understand that you may not be able to get some of these things. So contact them and they can definitely help you out with any questions that you might have on anything when it comes to CACFP. And again, with a medical statement, it does have to be signed by a recognized medical authority. We would like it to have the alternate foods, but sometimes we just don't see that. Now, if it does give an alternate food, you give that alternate food, but sometimes it just says no strawberries. So you just don't do strawberries, you substitute it for something else. And again, if it doesn't have the correct amount or the correct component, it can't claim it unless you do have that medical statement. And that medical statement trumps anything that we state, because we want the child to be healthy. Now, when you are serving milk, just be cautious. When you serve milk, what we do when we come to your facility is we look at all your receipts and we look at all the amount of milk that you served in the month. If you did not serve enough milk, then we take back every meal that month that milk was served. So every breakfast, every lunch, and possibly whatever snacks that had milk in it. So one, make sure that you're purchasing enough. Some other things that we have seen is that if you're not buying the correct cup size, we've had some people buy an 8.5 ounce styrofoam cup, and they would only fill it to the lip, not to the very top brim. And if you're not serving it to the very top brim, then you're not serving enough. And if you're not having the right cup, then it will make you short. The other thing that we notice is if you are doing liquid measurement versus dry measurement. So with the dry measurement, if you are trying to serve out of that, again, it's about an ounce short. So let's just say you use a dry measurement for 50 kids for every meal service that day. So let's say for 2 meals. So that's 100 ounces short just in one day. And it's going to really add up over the course of a month. So just make sure you're buying the right cup size, you're buying enough milk. And I understand it gets really hard. I'm from a very small farming community, that if kids don't like it, it's really hard to watch it be dumped. But we are paying you for it. We are reimbursing for you to serve it. So even if the kids don't drink it, just make sure they have to have the correct amount, even if they are choosing not to drink it and they're going to pour it down the sink afterwards. Let's talk about the grains component. This is one of the most complex components that we have when it comes to CACFP. There's just kind of a lot of rules when it comes to CACFP meal patterns, especially with the grain component. Now, last year, it changed from one serving size that we had to have to 1 ounce grain equivalent. When it did that, and we notice this a lot in schools as well, that means that you have to have for a 6 and older for a 1 ounce equivalent, or for our adults, 1 ounce equivalent is 28 grams. As you can see here with bread, we have one bread that is one slice is 28 grams and one slice that is 26 grams. This is very common that we're seeing. So make sure that you are buying either the 28 ounce grams and you're serving it either one or a half of it if you need to, or if you're adult daycare, you're serving 2 or just one with something else. But if it is the 26 gram, you have to serve enough. So you need to make sure, like if they need let's say they need the 1 ounce equivalent, so 6 and older, and you buy the 26 gram, that's all you can find. My suggestion to you is either cut it in triangles, or cut it in half and give them 3, or you can cut it into squares, cut it into fourths and give them 5. You have to give them the correct amount. There's reasons, like people ask all the time, like, well, what brand? I can tell you both of these came from the same brand. So I think it depends on if it's whole grain or not. I think it depends on how thick they're slicing the bread. So every one of them is different. It's more common to find the 26 ounce gram than it is the 28 gram. So again, be very cautious of what you're buying and make sure you're buying the correct amount, or that you're serving the correct amount. So just be cautious every time you buy it. I would always check, because you could be thinking that you're picking up the 28 gram sliced bread, and next time it's the same brand and everything, and it's the 26 gram. We just really harp on this. If you're always doing sandwiches, you won't have an issue with this, because you're going to be serving at least 2 pieces, or even if it's for the littler kids and you're cutting it in half, you're giving them 1 full slice. It's really when we notice the issue is if you're giving them a piece of toast. But if you're serving usually 2 pieces of bread or with something else, then you are going to be fine. It is required that 1 time per day that whatever grain item you serve, one of them has to be whole grain rich. With schools, it's required everything they serve. Actually, they're 80% for the week, but you guys are just 1 meal service per day. It's not per child, it's per meal service. So we just have to know what meal service. Just make sure you indicate what meal service you serve the whole grain rich item. If you do not serve a whole grain rich item, the meal or the snack with the grain with the lowest reimbursement will be disallowed for that day. So it's very important that you serve something whole grain rich. A lot of people will do toast, the whole wheat toast. There's tons of cereals out there. We're going to talk about a lot of different things that are whole grain. So you have a lot of opportunity to serve a whole grain. It's not as hard as you think, but just make sure it is done at least 1 time per day. Now, how do you know if something is whole grain? We do have what's called the WIC-Approved whole grain food list, which we will show you. Or the most common way is if you just look at the ingredient list. If the first ingredient is whole, then it's a whole grain product. If the first ingredient is water, and then the second one is a whole grain, that is fine too. Or if you have anything from a manufacturer or like a CN label that shows that it is whole grain, you can use that. So one is we have what's called a WIC-Approved whole grain food list. So if you type in Oklahoma WIC-Approved food list, it's going to show it's 2 sides. One side has whole grain options. As you can see here, it will say there's a 16-ounce loaf. There's tortillas, as you can see. If you scroll down to the bottom of this page, it's just a small screenshot. At the bottom, it has 1.5 pound loaves, and it has pastas. Now, you can kind of see under the loaves on the screen, it says 16-ounce loaves, best choice, 100% whole wheat, and it gives you the UPC code. Because this is so small, they do tell you the exact item to purchase. Now, what the WIC-Approved list is these items are considered whole grain. So if you find this item and you purchase it, you're going to be okay. And it's saying that it is whole grain. Now, there are a lot more products out there than just this. This is just what's allowed for when people have WIC money that they're allowed to purchase with their WIC dollars. So there's a lot more product out there, but a lot of people like that this is easy. They don't have to think about it. As long as it's the same product, you are good to go. The back side of this is cereals, and we're going to talk about that. Now, the cereal side does not automatically mean it's whole grain. It's only this one side that means it's whole grain. So the cereal side means something else, but just because it's on that cereal list does not mean it is whole grain. It's only this one side where it talks about whole grain options. If it says whole grain options, that's referring to if it's a whole grain item or not. When you're looking at whole grains, if you're looking at the labels, if it says whole wheat, entire wheat, cracked wheat, whole corn, whole durum, those items are going to be, again, a whole grain. You're going to see whole durum a lot in your pastas, your whole wheat. You see that on a lot of different things. Whole corn on your chips. We have seen some whole corn chips. Quinoa is automatically whole grain. Wild rice is automatic. Brown oatmeal. If you do oatmeal, whether you cook it from still oats, if it's instant, if it's oatmeal is an automatic whole grain. So again, this is just a small list. We have a lot more in your manual, so take a look there. But this is the most common that we see because we don't want to overwhelm you with items. But if you ever are just not quite sure, maybe you found a product that you really liked and you looked at the ingredient list, refer back into the manual onto the whole grain list, and it will let you know if it's a whole grain or not. So let's just say you found this breadstick and the first ingredient is whole wheat or flour. It's whole wheat flour. Then it has water, enriched wheat flour, and graham flour, and wheat gluten. Now, would this product be considered a whole grain? Now, the first ingredient is a whole grain and all other ingredients in the product are enriched or whole grain. So because of that, yes, you are required to serve it. And that's with anything. Any product that you serve, it has to be enriched. And I don't think you can really find anything anymore that is not enriched. So you should not have any problems with that. But again, as long as the first ingredient is a whole grain, it's automatic that it is a whole grain rich product. Now, homemade breads. We have a lot of people that want to make some things themselves. I think a big one is some breakfast items like pancakes. If you make anything from scratch, as long as 50% of the flour that you use is whole wheat or whole grain flour, and the other 50% can be enriched, that makes it a whole grain product. If you've ever made anything with 100% whole grain, it is flat, it is very dense, it is hard to eat. So USDA, their rules and regulations state as long as the item is in that item, it's 50% whole grain, it is considered a whole grain rich item. So again, if you make something like pancakes and you needs 2 cups of flour, if 1 cup of flour is a whole wheat flour and the other cup is all purpose flour, it is considered a whole grain rich item. We just need to see a copy of the recipe, and you can indicate that also on your menu serve form that that pancake that you served was a whole grain rich item. Now, the other situation when it comes to CACFP meal patterns, and this is very different than the National School Lunch Program. And I tell you that for a couple of reasons, because we have some schools that participate in our at-risk program, and they are allowed to serve these items on the school lunch program. We also sometimes see that daycares will maybe call in on a school and maybe do a complaint because they're serving things that are not allowable. And this is where the school side and the daycare side differ, or our adult daycare side. So schools they can do sugar items. They just can't, they watch their sodium. But for anything on CACFP, which is our adult daycare centers, our child care centers, Head Start programs, we watch the sugar on those. So if you serve breakfast cereal, it cannot contain more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce, and it includes ready to eat, instant, and regular hot. You cannot serve grain-based desserts, and this is for all ages. If it's a CACFP program, we really watch the sugar, especially in your grain items. So we talked about the WIC-Approved list. And again, this is the website where you can go to. It is 2-sided, that form. So one side does talk about the whole wheat or whole grain options. The other on the back side of that is your cereals. Now, if there is a cereal that is located on this form, it can be served and it meets the sugar requirements. but just because it's on this list does not mean it's whole grain. And I can tell you that by looking at grits are not whole grain, malto meal is not whole grain, cream of wheat, those are not whole grain items. Now, a lot of these cereals are going to be whole grain, so you will be able to account that. But again, this is just a WIC-Approved list. There are a lot more cereals that you can buy at the store that do meet requirements as well that are not on this list. But a lot of people, when I was in the field, a lot of people chose to use this. It does have brand names on it. It has generic names on it. And it just made things a lot easier for them. So again, the side with the bread, the pasta, and the tortilla, that's if it's a whole grain. On the back side, these all meet the sugar requirements. Now, you do need to make sure, so you can see on here, we have Cheerios. When you're writing things down on your menu as served forms, or whenever you are looking for products, make sure, so you have Cheerios on here and multigrain Cheerios. If you are buying Honey Nut Cheerios, they are not allowable. They have too much sugar. So definitely watch out for some of the items. And when you write it down, be very specific about what you bought. Because again, like Cheerios is on here, but Cheerios makes a lot of things. They make fruity Cheerios, frosted Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios. And again, the only two that are on this list is Cheerios and multigrain Cheerios. So just be very cautious because it's not across the board. It's per item that you're serving. So the other question we get quite a bit is about if you do make your own oatmeal, can you add sugar to it? And you are allowed to do so. Just please be cautious with that. They're just saying when you purchase the item, it can't have sugar. So it has to be our lower end of the sugars. And again, there are cereals out there. I had someone at a training, it was Kellogg's Corn Flakes and Kellogg's Rice Krispies. They're not on this list. It's just they can't spend what dollars on those items, but they did meet the sugar requirements. So again, there's a lot more at the store. Don't feel like you have to only go by this list. It's a good guide. But if you need any help, again, with any calculations, what I would always tell whenever I was in the field, your program specialists, they all have work cell phones. You can take a picture of the product. I always say, take a picture of the front, the ingredients list, and the nutrition facts label, especially for cereals, and send it to them and say, I have a question about this. And they can let you know if it is whole grain. They can let you know if it does meet the sugar requirements. So reach out to them because they are used to looking at these products. And so they can give you a good idea if you're just stuck on one. Maybe there's something. I know a lot of times people get tired of this list. They want to change it up. So go to the store. Don't feel like you can get away from this list. So I just want to let you know that there are more items that you can serve, not just this list. It's a really good guide. Now we have some grain-based desserts. So you have what's called the grains chart. And on that grains chart, there's items in black and there's items in red. And the reason for this is because those items in red cannot be served on CACFP. And this is some of the items that can't be served. So brownies or cakes, Nutri-Grain bars like cereal bars, breakfast bars, cookies, and that includes fig bars like Fig Newtons and vanilla wafers, no granola bars, no sweet rolls like a cinnamon roll Danish or Pop-Tarts. Now, we get the question, you can serve a granola cereal if it meets sugar requirements, but not granola bars. We've had some people that also have their own granola cereal recipe. Please send it to us first or to your program specialist before you serve it. The reason why is we've seen a lot of recipes that have way too much sugar in it. So let us see it first and we'll be like, yes, you can make it and serve it, or no, you can't. We've had one recipe sent in. It was like 2 pounds of oats and 1 pound of sugar. That's just way too much sugar. So again, if you have anything that you want to make and it might be on the sweeter end, or it might fall into one of these categories, reach out to your program specialist and talk to them about it first before you cook it and serve it. We don't like taking money back. And if you do serve a grain-based dessert, it is not allowable. So therefore we would have to take back money if you're trying to use it as part of the reimbursable meal. Some of the items are not easily as identifiable. Years ago, we were at the grocery store and we saw this item called a breakfast round. But when we got up to it, really, it was just an oatmeal raisin cookie. So if it looks like it's a dessert, if it's questionable, again, reach out to your program specialist because they may call it a breakfast round, but if it's a cookie, we're going to call a cookie. So make sure, again, we just don't like taking funds back. Just reach out and see if it's allowable before you serve it. We do understand too that you may, I've ran into this situation several times. I had some centers that once a month, on the old meal patterns, they used to do like cupcakes and juice once a month to celebrate everybody's birthday for that month. And again, cupcakes are no longer allowable. So there's some things that you can do. Now, if you still want to have the birthday party, you can still do that. And the juice would be you can count the juice, but you would have to serve something else. So what this center would do is they would do the cupcake, which they would not charge it to CACFP because they can't, it's unallowable. And it's not part of the reimbursable meal. But what they would do is they would still serve juice and maybe do a yogurt, and the yogurt and juice were the reimbursable meal. It was just an extra for the cupcake, and that way they could still celebrate. We also had somebody that for 20 years was a daycare center. They did donuts every Friday. The kids loved it. She loved it. It was easy for her. She did not want to stop doing it. So she still continued to serve the donuts, but what she did do is she served milk and then a yogurt for breakfast and fruit. And then she had the donuts, and the donuts were an extra, but again, it was not allowable. It's unallowable CACFP cost. So the daycare center just ate the cost of that. But still, you can still do things like that, but just do it periodically. And that's kind of the best way to handle it, because we understand that you still want to do some celebrations, and sometimes celebrations are just better with sweet treats, but maybe you could start thinking of something else, of changing it to something that would be something that you could do as a reimbursable meal. So those are just some suggestions if you have any grain-based desserts that you would like to do and on special occasions.